morning friends, my name is Kane and welcome to another video of our boat restoration. My partner and I are restoring a 120-year-old timber purling lugger. It's very exciting. In this episode I'm going to be painting the trimmings on the deck, but before I do that I have to show you something very exciting. I have a book in my hand. It's called Arnie, Pearls and Luggers in the Torres Strait. It's about a man named Arnie Duffield. This is what the front cover looks like. This book is about one man's life, Arnie, who lived in the Torres Strait for, I think it was about 70 years, so most of his life. It's an amazing story about him and his family who owned a fleet of Australian purling luggers and played a major role in the development of the purling industry in Australia. For those that don't know, the purling industry started around the late 1800s, around the 1880s, and it went all the way until the 1980s. So I want to read the back of this book, and I have an idea, and I need you to tell me what you think of this idea, because I've been thinking about it and trying to figure out how to do it in a way that's really cool and somewhat stimulating and not boring and me rambling. So I have an idea that throughout the videos of this restoration, I want to read the most interesting points of this book from chapter to chapter. So I'm going to read to you the back of the book, and at the end of the video, please let me know if you think it's a good idea if I read interesting parts of this book to you throughout the restoration of this boat. So here we go. This is the story of Arnie Duffield, who arrived at Thursday Island in the Torres Strait, the northern tip of Australia, aged 10 in the year of 1936, beginning a life of adventure. His father worked on the famous sailing luggers, diving boats that harvested pearl shells and pearls for over 100 years up to 1980. Arnie, with his father and brother, with their own hands, would build their own flotilla of luggers to operate as a family company over eventful decades, seeing the Great Depression, war, and the immediate threat of invasion. A post-war boom in the region, the loss of divers and constant striving for safety at sea, failures of an industry, mounting threats to the environment. For 10 years he managed an innovative project cultivating pearls for jewellery, a change from selling shells, the mother of pearl, used for buttons and ornamentation. The tropical life provided excitement, stimulus, dangers, materials for yarns about crocodiles or sharks, drunks, bad weather at sea, a near drowning, a mercy dash in a fast boat to save a drowned pilot, and a few close shaves on bush airstrips. Arnie became a leading personality in this world, a humorist and practitioner of the wisecrack, always quick with a comeback. From childhood days observing the hectic life of the faraway little port at Thursday Island, Wyben, sorry about the pronunciation, I'm not too sure, Wyben under its traditional name, then working as a young man repairing warships and operating the family-owned boats. He would proudly state, a master mariner and proficient ship engineer. He would revel in the island life, enjoying great freedom, getting successes and hard blows. In private life, marrying, starting a family, experiencing the stresses and joys. At 95, he is known as the last man standing from days when the fleet would depart under sail. So this is a book written by the man and I think his nephew about his life. And Arnie actually owned our boat at one point. I think it was in the 50s. I have already read this book, but I'm going to reread it to you. And it's really interesting, and I feel like it's just a worthy thing to do, and it will enrich this video series and this project. So that's that. This is painting the decks. "7 years ago, my partner and I started our dream of sailing the seas and trading in silks. In April 2024, we finally bought our own boat, known as Waitoa, which means water warrior. Waitoa is a 1904 timber purling lugger steeped in maritime history and was made on the banks of the remote tropical paradise of Thursday Island. Our vessel is as close as you can get to a real-life pirate ship. We have embarked on an enormous journey of completing her internal fit-out and complete restoration, a task both daunting and exhilarating. Once complete, myself, Lon, our German Shepherd Zulu and Waitoa will sail the seas, and we will trade in silks of all kinds. Welcome aboard, onwards and upwards. Today's mission: tape this red part, undercoat this red part, and paint the first layer of charcoal all the way around. So I don't know how far I'll get, but I'm going to give it a good crack. Big job. Let's do this. Arnie Duffield recalls his arrival at Thursday Island in 1936 as a boy of 10. He stayed many years, becoming himself a fixture of life in the very far north much spoken of. Whenever the time came to leave, he resisted time and again. The place would never leave his heart. The distant island settlement held a kind of glamour for Australians over time, garnished and stimulated with the lure of pearls from the sea. Like an outpost of empire where fortunes could be made, where life might be hard, though with privileges, it beckoned. And they came, from Australia and from far and wide. Fishing for pearl shell and pearls was an opportunity for individuals and a valuable industry for the region. Arnie described the life that evolved in the settlement occupying most of this rather dry, remote island, 5 by 3 kilometres, in a blisteringly hot and humid climate, buffeted by strong winds which, residents agree, never stop. He recalls, pre-war, Thursday Island was a utopia. There were just a few vehicles, mostly trucks, and everybody walked everywhere. The only bitumen road went just a bit over 365 metres. The electric power went off at midnight and came on again at 6 a.m, provided the drivers were not running late. There was no crime, with only 250 of us on the island and only one police officer. You saw the customs of many races of people. There were 6 hotels. Really special to do what I'm about to do and paint the trimmings of this deck of this 120-year-old boat. For those who have watched the previous videos, I know that there's just mass overstimulation of video content online and too much time on the phone and internet, but if you have watched this video, you'll be familiar with the struggles that we have endured to get to this point. So it's been 6 years, and I just wanted to say that when I was in the bottom of the pit, when I was at rock bottom and I had spent $90,000 of my grandmother's inheritance that she saved in a cigarette factory for 30 years, and I started 2 cafes and they ended up failing, and I lost that inheritance and endured another $30,000 debt on top of that. When that was happening, I was trying to think of days like this where I could be on my own boat and I could do what I wanted to do to it, and it was mine and ours and Lon and I's. And so this is really special to me, to be able to decorate and upgrade our own historic vessel and just pay my respects to the story of this boat. Like, a lot of hardships on this boat as well. Like, the industry, the pearling industry, was renowned for hard work and dangerous work, long hours, months and months out at sea. So it's like, this is a living, breathing story. And so I've said it before, but it's a real honor to do this. And so I just want to let it be known that I'm not taking this lightly, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity that we've created to do this boat project. I recall waiting at the hotel for my father to finish drinking with his mates in the late afternoon, so we could go to our house on his 1926 vintage motorbike, up a hill, and I would be needed to dismount and push. People, men and women together, would gather at the main hotel, the Federal Hotel Green Room, to socialise. Though islanders did not attend, as under the law they were not permitted to drink.
There was a picture theatre open 6 days a week and several sports clubs. The Burns Philp trade store used to deliver, Bill packing arriving on a bicycle with the groceries, and he'd bring beer. For a time, Frank Joyce attempted to run a beef cattle property and dairy, starting with a bull and 4 cows on Prince of Wales Island, which did not prosper. There were several immigrants and all races were represented. The pattern of life would continue up to the end of the pearling season, and though the layoff, a long break, that was the monsoon season. Christmas started at the end of November and continued at least to the end of January. We did still have work to do during that long break as maintenance was needed on the boats. It was a small community crossing all barriers and all ages. He attended the state school with Europeans, mixed-race children, the Chinese and some others up to 1939. Of 8 children in his Queensland Scholarship year, grade 7, 3 were from Chinese families, 2, including himself, were Europeans, 1 was Japanese and 2 others he could not remember. There was another primary school for Islander children and a separate Islanders ward at the hospital, an arrangement that continued for a long time. Well into the 20th century, native Torres Strait Islanders were not permitted to set up residence on Thursday Island. Their island called Weyburn, as it was part of the state of Queensland, which maintained protective laws keeping Indigenous people out of towns. Things would be slow to change in Queensland and throughout Australia. The Torres Strait Islanders would remain a large majority in their homeland by 2016, still representing 92% of the local population of 4,500 people. In Linda Miley's biography of the pearl diver and skipper Tomitaro Fuji, she describes the Japanese presence on Thursday Island in a separate settlement adjoining the town known as Yokohama. From the 1890s, it had included boarding houses for the single male divers for each of the Japanese prefectures they came from, a brothel, a soy sauce factory, the interpreter's house, different shops, and a bathhouse. The Japanese were involved in many areas of business. They were engaged in shipbuilding and repairs, renting the luggers, and other professional activities. Many imported Asian goods were available. Asian tailors made suits to measure, and silks could be purchased for sewing by dressmakers. They were selling silks on Thursday Island in the early 1900s. How cool is that? There were also Japanese laundries, Japanese traditional days were celebrated, and the Japanese club organised such events as the Japanese Sports Day celebrations. Arnie Duffield recalls the regular pre-war shipping trade between Thursday Island and ports in Japan, Singapore and China, and names of the ships. We had the Marella, Marita, the Changsha and the Taiping. I remember they brought cane furniture, brass tables and dolls from Japan. Brought up in the area and in the industry during turbulent times, Arnie Duffield had a strong awareness of the immediate past, going back into the 19th century or earlier. There was a long-standing trade across from Darwin to the Torres Strait area, a lot of it run by Timorese given the name Manila men, who could use the southeast trade winds to go up and back. The Japanese came and went with large vessels that were known in the region as sempens, going after many things, whether beach demur, trocus or pearl shells. Big schooners came into use over 100 feet, which acted as motherships servicing luggers, about half their size, which did the diving work. The word lugger comes from an Asian type using a lug sail, no jib. They had that big fleet up to the disaster of the cyclone that hit Cape Melville, where they found shelter in Princess Charlotte Bay, until the wind came around in the other direction and most of them finished up on the beach or reefs.
So I'm sitting here reading this book to this Rode microphone for this video, and I've just read that there was a huge disaster in Cape Melville with a lot of pearling luggers in the 1900s. And I have an interesting observation about this paragraph and specifically about Cape Melville. I grew up in a town called Innisfail, and when my dad passed, after his funeral, my dad passed, a week and a half went by, it was a very stressful time organising my dad's funeral. And it was a long journey of like leading up to intense pain and suffering. And then once I had my dad's funeral, we had our dad's funeral, I decided that it was time for me to pack my truck and take a week away from the world and spend a week in silence. And the place that I drove to do that was Cape Melville. And I stayed there for 2 nights and 3 days, and stayed there for a few other, stayed at a few other places before and after that spot. But this is some video footage of that trip where I spent about 5 or 6 days in complete silence by myself camping. And Cape Melville is where one of the largest maritime disaster happened. And it's in relation to the pearling industry and pearling luggers. And I just wanted to say that that's quite interesting in my mind, that that's where I went and that's where the disaster was. I'm not saying that means anything, but it's just a pretty peculiar thing. So that's the footage of the trip, and now back to the story.
The blow was the Category 5 supercyclone Mahina in 1899, a high-intensity storm, Australia's worst, with an estimated 400 deaths, mostly from the pearling fleet, with 4 of the large schooners and 54 luggers destroyed. It also devastated the settlement at Bathurst Bay, which suffered a massive storm surge. Arnie recalled that smaller cutters, which had also been in use in the industry as opposed to private use, some 30 at TI before 1930, also began disappearing. He had only seen 3 working out of TI 10 years further on. Look at that colour, guys. It's actually quite dark. It's quite dark, but it is going to lighten up in the sun, I feel. Oh geez, that's going to look good. Yes, bring it on, bring it on. We've got a bit to do. The introduction of this book concludes by saying, "The following provides a brief history of the start of the pearling industry and European settlement in the Torres Strait. Then from Arnie Duffield's perspective of the great days of the 1930s, the Second World War in the Pacific when it came to TI, post-war prosperity up to 1956, with more great days producing pearl shell for billions of buttons, then a failed venture into deep diving with imported divers. Finally, the pearl culture industry, a historical maritime disaster, and later years still full of adventure." I just finished and it's nearly sunset, and this is what it looks like. And there's 3% battery left on the GoPro. I'm happy with it. It's darker than I thought. However, it will lighten as it dries properly. And we are getting rid of the black railings, so it is going to look different to what it does now, but I do prefer it over the red already. I know some people like the red, but it's just not our vibe. So that's it. Ooh, look at that difference. Look at that difference. Alright, bye for now everyone.
Well, that was my first attempt at narrating like David Attenborough, so please let me know what you think, and I will either continue trying to do this approach to editing videos, or I will just run away and hide forever and never do it again. If you are interested in supporting us on this mission to restore this boat, there are three ways you can help us out. You can watch all of our videos. You can consider buying some of our silks. We have a silk brand. I've mentioned it heaps. I'm going to keep mentioning it until we can see some actual increase in sales, or I'm going to keep talking about our silk brand because that's what we're trying to grow so that we can sustain ourselves when the boat is ready and to help us afford restoring the boat. And thirdly, if you are interested, please consider signing up to our Patreon page. That would really help us out. Thank you and bye.